Hey guys, this is Dan from Dan's Auto Maintenance, and today I'm going to do a transmission fluid replacement and filter change on this 2002 Pontiac Grand Am. So here we are, and I've opened the hood, and if we want to check the transmission fluid on a vehicle, usually we would look for a transmission fluid dipstick. And if we look around this engine here in the 2002 Pontiac, we see there is an motor oil dipstick. But if we looked around, we will not be able to find another dipstick for the transmission fluid. And that's because these vehicles are different and they don't have a transmission dipstick. That makes it a little more difficult. But if we look more closely, we can look down deeper into the engine there, and there is actually a cap. It may be difficult to see here, but there's a cap there at the bottom, and that cap is where we would fill and put new transmission fluid into. Now, to do a transmission filter change or flush, we're going to need several supplies. The first items we're going to need are these ramps here, so we can lift the car up and we could work underneath the engine there and the transmission pan. Then we're going to need a lot of rags and paper towels. No matter how hard you try, transmission flushes and fluid replacements tend to be very messy. We're going to need a ratchet set. Sometimes you may need a metric ratchet set, so I have these available as well. Ideally, torque wrenches are good because then you can tighten up all the bolts to the correct specifications. We also need some catch pans, as well as a container to put the used transmission fluid. Once we empty all the transmission fluid, we're going to need some new fluid to put in the transmission, and each vehicle requires a specific type of transmission fluid. Now this Pontiac here requires Dextron 3, and this type of fluid is compatible with that, but you need to check your owner's manual and make sure you're using the proper transmission fluid. We're going to try to get rid of most of the old fluid if possible. When we drop the transmission pan, that's not actually going to take all of the fluid out, but we're going to try to take out as much as we can and then put in brand new fluid when we're finished. So here I've put the vehicle up on the ramps and lifted the front end of it, and it's also important to have your emergency brake on during this procedure. And if you go behind here, behind these back wheels, you definitely want to put something behind, like a block of wood or a rock, to make sure the vehicle does not slide, just to keep things safe. Now I'm under the hood and there's not too much space available, but it's enough, and we can see here the oil pan, and there's the drain plug for the oil. And if we go up, if we go down a little further, this larger pan right here, that is the transmission pan, and that pan also has a drain plug, and that is up in there. And we're gonna have to loosen that up. There it is. We're gonna have to loosen that up and drain some of the transmission fluid. And then we're going to actually unbolt the transmission pan itself so we can get at the filter and get the rest of the transmission fluid out. Now, before we do that, it's important to have your rags down here, and also I have this catch pan, and this catch pan has measurements, so I can tell exactly how much transmission fluid comes out here, and I can keep track of the amount of transmission fluid that we've lost, and that way I'll know exactly how much to put back in. So let's loosen that bolt and let the transmission fluid come out. 1/16 size ratchet for this, and then I'm going to go up there into the pan, and I'm going to loosen it, and I've got my catch pan ready for when the transmission fluid starts to come out. And I'm going to finish loosening up with my hands here, and then just start dripping out in the pan. And you got to be careful because it's going to come out fast. And it's going to make a huge mess if you're not ready. Okay, so I'm waiting for the rest of the fluid to drain out, and it looks like we have about 5 or 6 quarts that was drained out, plus at least another quart here, so that should bring us up to about 7 quarts. And as soon as this fluid is done draining, we're going to drop the pan, the transmission pan. We're going to have to loosen the bolts first, take the pan down, and then we're going to remove the old filter, clean out the inside of the pan, and then install a new filter, put the pan back on, and then refill with new transmission fluid. Now, when taking off the transmission pan, it's important to keep the pressure even, so you need to loosen the bolts in sort of a crisscross pattern. So instead of going around the edge of the transmission pan, you would loosen the bolt in one part of it, then go to the opposite side and loosen the bolt in the other part, and go crisscross back and forth until the bolts are loose, and then take it down slowly. Okay, well, it turns out the correct size is actually 5/16, and I found that out as I was trying to loosen the bolts. As I'm loosening the bolts, the pan is starting to leak all around, and there's more transmission fluid that is coming out. So I'm going to do this slowly so we don't make a bigger mess than we have to. Okay, it took some time, but after the fluid drained out and I loosened all the bolts, I dropped the transmission pan, and this is what we have now. And now that the pan is dropped, that exposes the inside here, including the transmission filter, which we're going to replace. Inside the pan, after we take it off, there are a few things to notice. First of all, there's the residue of the transmission fluid, which is pretty dirty, and we hope that there aren't any metal chunks or anything like that, because that would be evidence of some more serious problems with the transmission. But over here we have a magnet, and the magnet is supposed to collect some of the fragments and keep it from going through the transmission, and we do expect there to be some gunk on there, and that's not that's not unusual at all, but before we put it back in, we do want to clean that magnet off. And we also see the gasket here, which is typically reusable, and or in some vehicles it is, and this looks like it's in decent shape, so I'm just going to reuse this when I put the pan back up. And but before we do that, we definitely want to clean the magnet. We want to clean the bottom of the pan, get all of that off. You can use a brake cleaner or a carburetor cleaner, or you can just use a paper towel, and just get rid of all the gunk around the pan, clean the magnet, clean the gasket as well, and then we're going to install the filter. So I'm cleaning out the inside of the transmission pan here, and I noticed this earlier, but there seems to be some oil caked on the bottom and the sides of the transmission pan. So it looks like the owner of this vehicle has an oil leak somewhere. So I did inform the customer about that, and hopefully she'll be able to do something about that as well. Now, I did my best to clean out the inside of the transmission pan. Now we're going to go and focus on getting the old filter out and replacing it with the new filter. Okay, so we are under the hood again, and the transmission pan has been removed, and that exposes the transmission filter, the old filter. So now we're just going to take this filter out. So you want to grip it and turn it, and maybe wiggle it back and forth a little bit. And this is where it's attached. So I'm going to have to try to wiggle this out until it comes out. And when it comes out, there's going to be some more fluid that's going to leak. So I have to make sure the pans are here ready to catch that extra fluid. And that's why this job is extremely messy. Okay, so I took out the old filter, and this is what it looks like. And I've opened up the new transmission filter, and you can get that at your local auto parts store. Just give them the make, model, and year of your vehicle. Sometimes there are a couple varieties, but you should be able to find it. And there is also a gasket that comes with it. but since the old gasket seems like it's in decent shape, I'm just going to reuse that one. Now the new filter also comes with a seal here, and that seal is actually still installed. So if we look at it, or the old seal is still there, and as long as this old seal is in decent shape, it can be fairly difficult to take these old seals out. So if there's no problem with it, then we should be able to reuse the old seal. So I've popped out this new seal, and then I'm going to be able to install the transmission filter there underneath the old seal. Just to see what we're dealing with here, I have the old filter on the left, and you can see that it's collected a lot of debris and gunk over time. And then over here we have the new filter, brand new, fresh, and ready to be installed. Now before I put the new filter on and the transmission pan back, I'm just going to check these bolts here and just make sure that they're still snug. I'm not going to make them tighter. I'm just going to make sure they're not loose at all. Once I've double checked that, now it's time to install the new filter. So I want to make sure it's in there snug and the seal is tight around it. And make sure it's lined up. We should be good to go. Now I'm going to take the transmission pan, which has been wiped clean, as well as the gasket, and then I'm going to reinstall that. So you want to take the pan and you want to line it up properly, and then I'm going to put the bolts back in on a crisscross pattern and then tighten them. I'm currently tightening up the bolts here, and I'm going from one side to the other to tighten them. Then make sure they're fairly taut, but don't tighten them too much. And also make sure you remember to tighten the transmission fluid drain plug before you put new transmission fluid in. Now that the transmission filter has been replaced and the pan has been sealed, now it's time to add new transmission fluid. And I have everything here in catch pans so I can keep track of exactly how much fluid we took out. Now these hold 7 quarts, and if it's on you want to put this on a flat surface, and it's roughly flat where it's sitting right now, and it's about up to the 6 quart line, if you can see that, and the other one as well is around the same. So we have somewhere between, adding those two together, somewhere between 12 and 13 quarts of transmission fluid that we got rid of. So we're going to replace the same amount, and that should be the capacity of this particular car. So it looks like most of the transmission fluid has been removed, which is good. And then we can replace it with completely new transmission fluid. And in order to do that, we're going to have to use this this funnel here. Okay, so now I'm adding the new transmission fluid. I'm going to add about 11 or 12 quarts. Okay, so I finished putting in the transmission fluid, and that should wrap up the job here. I put it between 12 and 13 quarts of fluid. I know that I took about that much out when we drained the fluid, and I know the capacity of this particular vehicle is about 13 quarts. So I just put in a little bit less than that. It's always good to make sure that you don't overfill the transmission fluid. So after done pouring that in, I have a little bit left over here, and just tighten up the cap down there and drive it a little bit, shift through some of the gears, and then the new fluid should be in there, and everything should be ready to go. So that is a transmission fluid change on this Pontiac Grand Am.